of the day. And I think this is sort of bookended the conference very nicely. The first session was really exploring what had just happened over the past 18, 24 months. And now we're very much firmly looking at what the future of marine insurance will be like in London, particularly, I suppose, thinking about some of the wider societal pressures that every industry around the world is facing at the moment. I think we're set for a really interesting discussion. And at this point, I'll pass over to the moderator, Simon Lockwood. Simon, over to you.
And welcome everyone to this final session on the future of marine insurance today. So my name is Simon Lockwood. I'm the head of ship owners at Willis Towers Watson, and I also pleased to have the role as chair of the marine executive of the London International Insurance Brokers Association, and you'd have heard them referenced through the day and some of the work that we've done within the industry. This session follows up nicely on many of the key issues raised through the day and through all the sessions, and in particular some of the points raised by our keynote speaker Andres Bisbaz this morning. I've worked in the London market as a broker for over 30 years, and I'm proud of how London has led the global marine insurance market for hundreds of years. What I want to know from the panelists is, will that be the case into the next 30 years and certainly and beyond as well? So what we're going to do is look at a series of questions on the key themes that you've got on there as well. As with all the other sessions, there is the ability both for questions to come from within the room and also to please ask questions, and I will be duty bound if I put my glasses on, if I can read them on the screen afterwards as well. It's the curse of age, and 30 years in the marine insurance industry sort of does that to you as well. But what I will do now, without more ado, is ask the panelists, starting with you, Phil, to introduce yourselves and perhaps give a little bit of a potted history of your sort of arrival of where you are today and your role.
Will do. Thanks, Simon. My name is Phil Parry. I'm the chairman of Spinnaker. I started my career as a maritime lawyer and ran away from that after a few years when I realised, A, that I had an entrepreneurial itch that I needed to scratch, and B, that there was nobody at that time, we're talking mid-1990s, nobody at that time who did recruitment within the marine industries. So we set up a business to do shore-based marine recruitment across the sectors, including insurance, and grew that into a broader HR consulting and salary benchmarking business. And so we recruit anything from, babies entering the industry through to chief executives of ship owners and insurers and so on. And so we have a lot of insight, if you like, into the private machinations behind people's moves and their attitudes towards the market. And hopefully I can impart some of those today.
Thank you. Stavriana.
I am Stavriana Sprogianidou. I am a director at Willis Towers Watson, and I am looking after our Mediterranean portfolio, doing hull and machinery, protection, indemnity, war, K&R risk, any marine-related perils. You can speak to me.
Thank you, Tom.
It sounds big.
He's got his own mind. Yes.
I'm Tom Walker. I'm a director at Tysers. I have no real potted history. I left university and I joined Tysers, and that's been my career for the last 12 years.
Good afternoon. I'm Melis Otmar. I work for BMS Harrison Dixon. I'm the claims director there. Also, I have the privilege and pleasure of sitting at the Committee of Simons at LIIBA. And together with that, I'm the current chairperson of LIIBA Subclaims Committee.
Thank you. So you will already have noted that we put together a range of backgrounds, a range of interests, and something that will hopefully and almost certainly create for some lively debate within the next period. So if we look at the themes for the session today, and the first one is about, is London still best place to lead the marine insurance market? And we've heard lots today from from the keynote speech through to that that first session, how London's adapted through these sessions on sanctions and the challenges that occur from there. That the rather thorny subject of how marine insurance deals with decarbonisation as well, and a lot of talk in the first session about the use of digitalisation and how the market is trying to evolve through that, but also particular challenges that the market has and finds itself. So and perhaps, although we've all tried to move away from it, but have failed to at this point, is perhaps the thorny subject of Brexit. So Tom, to you, has Brexit damaged London's role as the leading marine insurance market?
It's always terrifying talking about Brexit, isn't it? Everyone has lots of views on it. I think fundamentally it hasn't damaged our position. I think because the UK was on the other end of Brexit, if you like, we had to put a lot of things in place to make sure that we could trade through it. And I think we were very conscious of that. It was a bit of a race against time at the end for many businesses, but we all knew that we had to find a formula to be able to continue to trade with Europe. So, all of our businesses put those companies in place in Europe, if that's what we had to do. We're all going through endless additional exams to make sure that we can trade in Europe. I think what it did do, though, fundamentally, is it increased the cost of transacting business. And however you look at that, that does damage London's role. We've gone through, as a market, as an insurance market in the marine space in particular, a very challenging time. Lots of pressures from all sides, and probably central to that is cost. Where the rest of the market could keep their insurance costs at a lower level, I think London had to push it. And I think they say that, isn't it, 2% additional cost for a Lloyd's underwriter to put down their European stamp, which seems negligible, but I'm sure makes all the difference. So that's certainly the knock-on effect. And I certainly naively thought that we'd come to a decent trade deal quickly enough that it would just revert back to normality. I was very naive on that.
Yes, I don't think you're alone on that on that score. Something was going to happen and nothing ever did, and financial services seem to be the very not only at a last thought, seemingly a no thought when you come to any trading forward as well on that one. Sort of leading on, not just from the sort of the Brexit position, but also from this sort of future state, and something we're very much focusing on today, and sits sort of very neatly in your world, Phil, as you advise your clients. Post-pandemic, and this current shift to a more flexible working environment, what are the implications for the industry, and more importantly for this panel, the relevance of London? Another thing that's sort of come up today is who's missing out in this in this environment, or in this sort of remote environment. It seemingly it is our young and the talent as well. So can London keep that sort of influence in this changing world?
I think it can, but it's tempting to say who cares in a way. Those of us who live and work in London care, because presumably we don't want to relocate. But actually, I think and you might say that as a ship owner, does it really matter where you buy your insurance? As long as you can get the right product and get your claims paid, does it really matter whether it's coming from London or not? But I do think it matters, and from the perspective of London maintaining its quote unquote lead as a marine insurance capital. Inertia can be a very useful thing. London has a reputation, it's a bit of a age-old story, but ship owners still send their sons and daughters to the UK to be educated in Plymouth and Liverpool and London and at Cass and so on, and that maintains this sort of aura of maritime services expertise. And I'm a board member of Maritime London, so it's part of my voluntary role is to promote London, and I do think it's important in terms of the quality of the service and the knowledge and the expertise that the ship owners receive from us, that we do have centres of expertise, and you know, insurance and law are probably the UK's shining maritime lights, and so, you know, what is good about that is that the expertise sort of travels by osmosis from generation to generation, from person to person. So, you know, I think, and I hope that people will come back to the office, but just with a bit more flexibility. So maybe they'll do 3 days in the office and not 5. And I think our youngsters will again be trained face to face and will learn by osmosis. You know, the last 18 months has been just bloody strange, hasn't it, for all of us? But I think deep down, most of us probably belong back in the office, and I think we probably will end up there. So I don't panic. I don't think the end of the world has arrived because we were at home for a year. I think it's going to come back.
It's a fascinating sort of point. I thought people would be climbing over themselves to be back from day one. That hasn't happened, but it's starting to happen as well. But it was with great delight today. I was in the office, and we run, as well as from a recruitment perspective, we run a graduate scheme, and Stavriana many years ago. Not that many years ago, Stavriana was one of our graduates. But we also run an apprentice scheme as well, so a school leavers scheme. And I met Tom today, who's our latest school leaver to join us, and he's been in the office as many days as he can at the moment, and someone who's full of life and full of enthusiasm, but someone that we owe a duty to ensure that actually we maintain that passion, we maintain his knowledge, and I spent the first 2 years of my career in insurance working on a box in Lloyd's, doing little more than photocopying, but learning so much about the industry and actually how to behave and how to deal with people and what happens, and actually those things that stand people in good stead. You know, people who don't know naturally how to behave and how to conduct themselves in meetings. If we're doing it all remotely, then it is a real challenge. So I encourage companies. I encourage my own company to, as safely but quickly to get people back to that that future state, and others as well, and actually give London back what it needs in that trading environment that makes us special.
I think, Simon, if we don't correct it now, that 18 months, 2 years is going to very quickly be 5 years. And 5 years is a huge amount of time, actually, in terms of the vacuum that could be created, in due course. I'm absolutely terrified about that. And I really want our guys to get back in the office, because you just can't learn the same way. We've onboarded 6 or 7 people during lockdown just in our marine team, and I feel for them. It's not the same experience. Some of them are very young and they need to be pushed through in this. So yes. I think we've got to, as an industry, we've got to be really focused.
I heard a comment that was made in one of the other sessions about everyone's the same height on a Teams call, and it was with great enthusiasm. I waited for somebody to tell me one of their new recruits, and an insurer who'd said we've offered so and so a job, and I said, oh, you'll have a bit of a surprise when you meet it. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, just you wait and see. And this chap's 6'8", but of course on the same screen he could be 5'8" or 4'8" for that matter as well. So it is a different world that we're finding our way through. Stavriana and Melis, you are both very welcome, joiners of us in the London market community. And both of you have been part of that for also for a long time as well. But if I start with you, Melis, what brought you to London, and what, more importantly, keeps you in London as well?
To be able to answer that, I need to give a bit of background. I'm originally Turkish. I lived in Turkey until the age of 18, then went to the States for my university degree, and then I wanted to pursue a career in shipping. And as it has been pointed out, the best shipping courses are in the UK. And I was recommended, famously known as Professor Gramenos's course. And there are many other excellent courses in the UK. And I did my master's in shipping and finance at Cass Business School. after which I wanted to have a corporate experience before returning back to Turkey. And again, if you would like to be in the shipping sector or in any of the maritime service jobs, London feels like the center of the earth. Excellent companies in each cluster, as pointed out in the panel behind us. And I was very fortunate to have a job in marine insurance, and I started as a marine insurance claims broker. Then a bit of change of fate, because my temporary job, as you can see, has become permanent. That was due to personal reasons. But regardless of that, why I continue to be in the UK, not only because it is the center of shipping as far as I am concerned, it is the justice system here. We take it, or if I may say, sometimes you do take it for granted. But what this country provides is a just justice system. And the rule of law is fundamental to every civilization, and it provides protection. And I feel protected in this country. And if you look at the charter parties, the ship owner may have never set his or her foot in this country. The charterer equally so, but they have English law and jurisdiction. That's why I wanted to continue to be here. Then again, change of personal circumstances, that I had my first child, and that had been a determinant factor, because I wanted my child to have the opportunity to be educated in this country.
Okay, thank you.
I feel like giving you a round of applause, actually.
Well, then, don't let me stop you.
You're quite emotional.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. And Stavriana,
well, to be honest, when I first moved to the UK, I had no idea that I will be staying here forever. So I moved here, although my father was not a ship owner. He sent me to the UK to do my master's degree. And then I was just intrigued by the infinite opportunities that the city would present you with. So I decided to give it a spin. And then Willis arrived to my university, which was CAS. I think now it's called Bays or something like that. And they said, why don't you work for a graduate scheme? So I joined, and then 2 days ago, it was my 10th year anniversary at Willis. But yeah, again, I feel very grateful, because I have worked in one of the top global broking firms. I have worked with world-leading professionals in the shipping and financial industries, and I would not change it for anything in the world.
well, thank you. And if you weren't emotional then, Phil, you're definitely going to be emotional now as part of that one. And so at the centre of the insurance market, and it's been referenced several times today, and certainly from the city and from London, and also opposite our own building, is the Lloyd's market and the Lloyd's building. And we've heard reference several times today, Lloyd's and some changes and some questions about the future. And really the question is on here is about, is marine still a core business for Lloyd? So Melis, that's to you first, and actually you, something that you were intimately involved in is did the recent proposed closure of the Lloyd salvage arbitration branch, and was as referenced in the first session this morning, indicate that Lloyd's has fallen out with love with marine? Do you think that actually, and I have to say something I think I was proud of from a LIIBA perspective, from the work from Maritime London perspective as well, but the backlash that Lloyd's found itself in terms of the protest surprised Lloyd's. And so where do you think that sort of positioned Lloyd's, and what did it make it? Where does that lead us?
This is an excellent question, because I think it does summarize where we are today. Something that has happened, which would be perceived as a very negative incident, has become a very positive incident. I'm sorry, I will be kind of repetitive, but I just want to give a bit of a background. Mr. Andreas Bispas has explained that Lloyd's proposed to close the salvage arbitration branch on the basis that they no longer consider it to be core business to the corporation. And as you know, it's the main support framework for LOF. Does that mean Lloyd's is not in love with marine anymore, although where Lloyd's started with marine insurance? No, I don't think that was the main driver. The main driver was that the current framework Lloyd's is aiming to be in, which is data, automation, and digitalization driven. How would I explain it? From my understanding with the discussions we've had between various committees, that Lloyd's looked into the data regarding the salvage arbitration branch for the last 12 months. Looking at that data, they came to this decision. And this again summarizes what we have discussed today. Data is powerful, data is power. We are reliant on data, but if we just look into data and do not engage it with the human aspect of it or human expertise, this is where we come to. Because when this decision was made by Lloyd's, or the announcement to be correct, I'm sorry to say, hopefully I won't get into trouble, it was quite short-sighted. They didn't give any due consideration to the negative impact it would have on the London insurance market and London as a maritime cluster. And on top of that, they didn't consider the legal framework from the point of view that it is not only the aspect of salving the vessels themselves, but there's a scopic clause, huge environmental impact. There's loss of life at sea. None of these aspects seem to be considered. But then it was an extremely proud moment for London as a maritime center, because in the last 20 years I've been here, I've never seen all the committees, members of the maritime community in London to come together to this effect. Everyone united their forces together, and as mentioned earlier today, LIIBA, Lloyd Salvage Group, the international group, the International Chamber of Shipping, and many other important parties came together and issued their protest of letters, either individually or in a group. And where does it bring us today? Thankfully, Lloyd's did take the comments, and they are not closing the SAB. And it has been offered by LIIBA, LMA, and IUA that they invite the committees as a working group to make SAB more efficient, more transparent, and discuss the potential funding, what can be done within our community.
Thank you. And I think it's a really strong point to just to reinforce that we have a common goal, which is our clients, which is shipping, the shipping community, and we have a voice, and don't always use that to reach that common goal. But when we do, we can be effective, and we should be effective, and we shouldn't be afraid to challenge these things as well. So that was a very satisfying outcome to that one. One of the other themes that sort of run through today, and I'm going to struggle with the word now, digitalisation. There we go, got it out there. Yes, and the use of data and algorithms. Everyone loves an algorithm for making whatever decisions they need to in life now from there as well. But Tom, marine is a people business. Marine is a specialist insurance. do algorithms work in underwriting for marine insurers? Can that, is it a good thing? Can it really sort of drive this market forward, or does it then have that negative impact on London and the Lloyd's market for that matter?
I think marine people in general can get a bit unstuck within all of their own organisations. I was thinking last week how small a percentage, sadly, the marine departments are as part of a syndicate or a company or and the way that underwriting has progressed for the last 30 years involves digitalisation, it involves modelling, and it involves employing actuaries. And I think if you sat down any chief underwriting officer and they said that they were going to sort of rip up these models or change how that direction was going, they would really struggle. The question I always have, and no one can ever really give me the answer, is fundamentally, are underwriting results better now using all this data and all the digitalisation than they were 30 years ago when there was very little of it? And I don't think they are.
It was an interesting point. So Andrew Yeoman on the first panel talked about a scenario where if he sold his services to every single underwriter, they'd be the same level of premium and same level of claims, which was interesting. And there's a question how you use that. The also and Andrew was very honest about that. Of course, as a commercial entity, his job is to sell that to as many underwriters and entities as possible as well. It's not an altruistic business that exists, and he has competition on that one as well. But I think it is a real challenge, and I think it comes back to many of the other themes as well about relationships. It's to Magna's comment, you can't skin a skeleton. That was I like that one. I shan't be using it with any of the underwriters in the future. But it's a point. But actually, a big part of what we do as brokers and what we have to do on behalf of our clients as well is able to create a differentiation between if all risks by the underwriters' belief are underpriced, and we know that the market has been soft for a long time, and it's changing, and pricing has corrected quite significantly. Then surely the skill of the underwriter has to be of not the computer says yes or no, but the skill on the underwriter is selecting the right risk, based not on his gut feel. And I think that was something that was thrown today. Mm-hmm. It's about the gut. It's not about the gut. It's so much more than that. But actually, if it's that client that you can look in the eyes and actually that they want to work with you and over a long period of time, I think that is absolutely critical.
I also think Lloyd's, and this is probably why the market share of Lloyd's has reduced over the last 5 years, and the Scandinavian model has taken over, is that we're departing from doing right by the client. Lloyd's, I think, used to be always seen as the centre of the community because of things like the arbitration skills that they had. Even going back to Lloyd's Salvage Association, we offered something that other people didn't. Scandinavians offer something that other people don't. They add value to their clients, and that's what we've got to be focused on. There's an amazing new concept that is being developed by Lloyd's called lead follow, which is very data driven, and that's the idea that you can either be a leader or you can be a follower. Now, there have always been followers and leaders in Lloyd's, but this fundamentally says that a computer can just go, our model says you can basically make money out of Supramax bulkers and product tankers. So we'll get rid of any human element. No underwriters. We'll just get on with it, and we'll just say that we'll take basically a quota share of the market on that. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it will come out. But in the same breath, and it came up in the last panel, you've got underwriters under more pressure than they've ever been under in their whole careers, where management are saying you can only do this and you can only do that. And so the only way they can differentiate is to actually provide sort of leadership in what they're doing and actually take a stand. So there's so many mixed messages at the moment. And until I think people can fundamentally go, right, we are trying to add value to our clients and then strip everything else out. If data is going to allow a better service to our clients and hopefully improve costings, then let's go for it. Let's all get behind it. But if it's actually going to make things more complicated and actually push prices up and reduce the service we can offer, then I'm afraid the Scandinavians have got it right, and I will run across the sea to there.
If I may
Please.
add on from the claims perspective, definitely the technology does help in terms of efficiency and transparency. I can go on ECF and see everything when I submitted the claim, when it was accepted, noted, perfectly transparent. And in terms of the turnaround times, since I have started broking claims, it has definitely brought more efficiency. But there's a but. It works because we are dealing, or the ones who are on the other side of the screen are the people who have been in the market for a very long time, who have the claims expertise, so they use the technology for the benefit of their clients. Obviously, then we can further discuss how more the underwriters can be involved with the clients, but I think it's the next topic. But if we go to just capturing data, and I think Lloyds is currently very focused on capturing core data and making a triage system out of that. If we just focus on that and we forget this human element to it, the expertise, then we'll be exactly where you are pointing out to be.
Thank you. And before we move on to that, I think we just did sort of a further development on the market as well. In we saw Staviana, North of England, the latest P&I club, to enter the hull market, or perhaps re-enter the hull market. Certainly the whole market, but this time under their own brand. Do you see a continued move from the clubs into the sector? And obviously some do, and we have Guard who have for a longer period of time as well. Is it good for the market? Is it good for owners, most importantly? Or do we see a repeat, or do you see a repeat of the failed experiments of the past?
It's certainly good for our clients because this means it's more capacity, so more competition. So this will eventually drive the prices down. So great news for the clients. But I don't think we'll see more P&I clubs entering the hull and machinery market in the foreseeable future. Now, North, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, had a very special vehicle there because basically they built on Sunderland Marine and they acquired the talent and the expertise from the underwriters that they used to work for a Lloyd syndicate. So they didn't have to start from scratch. So they had the critical mass there. Now, starting from scratch, and it can be extremely costly in this market to acquire the right talent, to have the infrastructure, the know-how. You're just going to be ruled out by your competitors extremely quickly. Yes, it is a hardening market at the moment, or it has started to stabilize, so the prices are up, but it is a cycle. So until it's up and running, it will start softening again. So unless you're ready to make some losses, I wouldn't see any P&I clubs entering the market now. And they're so well established in their sector, so I can't see why doing it. They will have to have a very strong desire to diversify their insurance product offering. But I guess if we were to ask any of the board of directors, they would probably say that they would rather invest in stocks and bonds rather than setting up a new hull and machinery underwriter at the moment.
Yes, and I agree. I mean, I think if you look at what's happened in relatively recent history with one of some of the biggest clubs, you look at as standards move into Lloyd's, and which was I mean, let's call it what it was, pretty disastrous at any sort of any level, but also the and how that was decided. But others have schooled Guard and North of its early days, but obviously there's a background.
I can't disagree with any of the logic of Stavriana's answer, but let's go with gut feeling, which we've all already discussed is not a great idea, but nevertheless, I would place a pretty large bet on the fact that you'll see the clubs doing a lot more hull business this time. In 10 years' time, I think the market dynamic will have changed quite significantly. The one thing that I've always been slightly surprised hasn't yet happened, and I wonder if it will happen as clubs do diversify, and there is an appetite for that. I mean, I hear, it's funny when I always sort of feel like a child pretending to be a grown-up, but you realise that you're the same age and you're older than some of the club CEOs, and they're your peer group. So I chat to them and they chat to me, and there is an appetite for diversification. And I think there's been lots of discussion about club consolidation over the years. It's happened a little bit, but not a lot. And I think for the clubs, one way of, or the club managers, one way of either skirting that issue or dealing with that issue is to diversify and to find another way to justify, their existence as individual managers and value adders to their businesses. Is diversification. But the thing I was going to say, I'm surprised that no clubs have, and I may be wrong, have done a service-led deal or a claims-led deal with some of the market underwriters. One of the things I hear about the Lloyd's market and the companies market is that actually they're not really set up to provide the same kind of mutual-based service levels that the clubs do. So whether clubs will ever take lines alongside the market and provide sort of a leader's type of service, I don't know, but that would be an interesting one. But I bet they'll be diversifying.
No, it's an interesting point. I think where many of the clubs have made a mistake in the past is looking at from a ship owner's perspective how you engage with someone on a first party risk, hull and machinery, as opposed to how you deal with someone in a third party risk where you're, let's face it, your interests are aligned, and a third party risk is you against the world rather than that sort of push pull with the hull machinery and looking at it from that perspective as well. And I think it is a real opportunity. I'd like your way of thinking that actually you can bring in that expertise, and actually if you look at that sort of mutual way of dealing with claims. So if you look not just at the P&I clubs, but also if you look at something like Norwegian Hull Club, who actually have a large sort of expertise on there as well, which, to the greatest respect to most Lloyd syndicates, the business isn't at a level that could ever be some really strong claims underwriters, but can never offer the degree of complexity of service as well. I mean, we have within this room and on the previous panel probably, and we'll come on to this topic later, there's only one hull underwriter in the London market that's, as far as I can remember, certainly in the Lloyd's building, who I'm looking at the moment, so he's smiling away, that actually ever went to sea. So that is an interesting thing. Whereas, obviously within the club structure, but also within Scandinavian insurers as well, there tends to be sort of more people with practical sort of maritime expertise than underwriting. But I think it's thank you both. Melis touched on this briefly, but the next sort of theme I'd like to sort of look at is about relationships between marine insurers and ship owners, and also and cargo owners for that matter as well, and how they continue to develop or perhaps redevelop the strong lines of communication. And I think that had existed, I think they've been strained a little bit over years. And but Stavriana, your clients, what do your clients want from their marine insurers? Is there currently enough engagement? And I appreciate the pandemic has made things a little bit more challenging. If we take, for example, the recent, and I'm going to call it for what it is, imposition of an AIS clause as an example, and again, it sort of fits into this whole world of sort of perhaps a slight sort of demonisation of ship owners. Prove that you're not doing bad, rather than we'll demonstrate that you were doing something that you shouldn't have been doing. How do you think?
That's a very hot topic.
That's why I gave it to you. Yeah.
Thank you. So all shipping contracts and all shipping deals are based on a two-way communication process. So ship owners are so much used to it. So they have to go through several rounds of discussions and negotiations to reach a mutual agreement with their charters, with anyone involved. We have seen recently especially during lockdown, there have been 2 or 3 new clauses introduced and imposed on marine insurance contracts, which have not been very welcomed by our clients. One of them is the communicable disease exclusion clause, which it's okay because the hull and machinery market has been largely unaffected by COVID-19 losses. So it is a very rare occasion to have the COVID-19 as a proximate clause of a ship damage. But the AIS clause, that's an interesting one because, and I know why Simon has asked me, because we have this issue at the moment. So apparently there are many governing bodies around the world that they want to impose or basically cancel cover automatically if there are any dark AIS periods during the ship's operation. One of these governing bodies is OFAC. So OFAC is trying to impose to all ship operators that if your AIS system is not working, you have no cover. OFAC has been discussing this with the International Chamber of Shipping and with the IMO and with the Joint Hull Committee. So the Joint Hull Committee, in an attempt to soften OFAC's request, they have created this AIS exclusion clause, which basically uses the same wording as the IMO SOLAS legal text. And what it says is that if there is a dark AIS moment during the operation of your ship, then it allows the underwriters to check, to inspect the AIS records and reconfirm if cover is in place. So it doesn't exclude cover, it just gives them the option to check the records. Now, in shipping, we have to be very commercial and quite flexible. There are many times and very legitimate causes that the AIS may lose signal a little bit. So we as brokers fully understand our clients' frustration, but we need to perhaps put together a working group, a think tank between underwriters, brokers, and ship owners. Like, what is happening in the world? What are the new regulations? What does OFAC need? What does the ICS need? What does the Joint Hull Committee need? How can we make it a better place for everyone? Because if the ship owners are not happy, we are not happy, and then it is a whole chain. It's the whole domino effect. So as long as we can communicate everything in a two-way process, I guess it will be a better place for everyone, a better market for everyone.
Yeah, and I do, and I'm very rarely an apologist for underwriters, but I'm feeling generous today. But underwriters and Joint Hull were faced with a very difficult situation, and they responded in a way that they felt was going to make the best of a bad job. Unfortunately, I think it's we've ended up with a situation that sort of seems to say prove that you're good rather than we've got to demonstrate that you're bad, and that's that really is the the challenge within that one as well. Tom, are you concerned that underwriters are outsourcing? It perhaps leads on from some of our digitalisation questions, but are outsourcing decisions to third-party companies, and is this putting a strain on the relationships with ultimately those people that keep us all in business, which are our clients?
When you say third-party companies, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean we had Windward. Let's use it as an example as on the sanctions panel earlier. An organisation that a lot of that companies are using in terms of to actually to monitor that actually things are being done correctly, and actually things that that actually provide a very real service, not only to underwriters, but also to ship owner clients as well. But at the same time, it is that sort of passing that sort of decision process along to somebody else, causing a further challenge.
I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that I suppose linked to this AIS situation, where people are asking questions that make owners question whether they understand their business, and that just is so frustrating. So you can look at RightShip, for instance, which some underwriters were very focused on. I think 3 years ago, if you went in there with a risk, they said, "Oh, RightShip says I shouldn't write it." You go, "Okay, brilliant. I'll just go somewhere else then." But it seems very simplistic. I think that is frustrating. Underwriters now have the ability to look at port state controls, for instance, and I constantly have this discussion with underwriters. And they say, "Oh, look at all those port state controls. Can you get some comment from the owner, please, as to why they have so many port state controls?" And I say, "Well, they trade in the US. They get everything they do. It's scrutinized. So of course they have port state controls, but that's something that's put in place by the shipping community to make sure that standards are kept at a certain level. That you shouldn't be worried about that. But it's a tick box. It's something that's in their sort of process, and it does all come back to process." I'm sure if I were a chief underwriting officer, I would say, "Yeah, but look at their results over the last 10 years. We haven't made money out of marine hulls. So what are we supposed to do? We're trying to put parameters in place in order to make sure that our underwriters are given the best chance of making money." So RightShip comes in, Windward comes in. I get all these things, but I just think we're slightly missing the mark. I think there just needs to be a sort of recalibration and an understanding of what's behind all these things. And again, I suppose COVID has just allowed us all to be so removed from the end product. The beauty of traveling and sitting down with a ship owner and actually understanding what their concerns are and going with an underwriter. That's the most powerful thing you can do, is to sit there, as you know, Simon, you sit there with an underwriter and you all look into the whites of each other's eyes and you almost make a pact that we get each other. Let's do this long term. That you can't do that with a RightShip or a port state control or anything like that. So yeah, I am concerned about it. I do think it puts strain on relationships. I think London has a lot to do on that, but I think it's not totally across the board. There are still people that get it, and there are plenty of people who go, "Well, this says this, but I know this, so I'm fine." Yeah, and as long as that continues, I'm not that concerned.
And we have a responsibility to make sure that we trade with the people that that genuinely believe that as well, and make the difference. And again, going back to the "you can't skin a skeleton," I'm going to keep using.
Me too.
That's me.
I think that's wonderful. Yeah.
But if you're gonna if there's not a lot of margin in something, that's it's better to do it with the ones that you truly understand and you want to work with. But I mean, Melis, what has this had a sort of an impact from a claims perspective as well? Is there are things being unduly checked that wouldn't have been checked before, or has the process become clunky, do you think?
If I may, I will answer in stages. First stage, I would want to go back to Brexit, in the sense that for the same reasons explained for the placing side, it has become more inefficient from my as a claims handler. It doesn't affect my client because the claim gets paid, but I have to switch between systems depending on whether it's a European client or not. I need to wear my Spanish hat to be able to make a payment to a European client. Then I wear my British hat to make a payment to a non-European client. So forth on. Coming to the introduction of these force clauses and specifically AIS clause, I haven't seen it in practice. I don't think anyone of us has seen it in practice, especially in terms of claims. But I do not see how it will be feasible, because Insurance Act 2015 says that breach of warranty, in the case of a breach of warranty, if it is irrelevant to the cause, the underwriter can't discharge himself or herself from liability. Whereas with AIS, if there is a breach of the clause, the underwriters are not liable for any loss, damage, liability arising during that time of breach. There's no proximate causation, and it is in conflict with Insurance Act. I'm not a lawyer. I don't have a law degree, but this has something I have flagged up because I think that there is a conflict between the Insurance Act and this clause. We shall see. And regarding gut feeling, I would like to say something about it. I actually do see that we have gut feelings and it works. I wish I could remember the book, but I had read, this is a real story, that they excavate an ancient Greek sculpture. And the expert who comes in says, this is not ancient, but they do carbon data and it matches the period. Obviously, I'm not an expert in the area, but the sculpture itself is exactly for that period, how it should be composed. Carbon data proves it, and but the expert insists that it's not from that period. And it's a brand new one, actually. And later on, it turns out to be a brand new sculpture. So I do believe that we, the experts in this room, can use our gut feelings in assisting our clients or doing our job rightfully.
Thank you. And Phil, look at this sort of development of relationship and strengthening the relationship, and can the insurance industry be a positive influence, particularly on sort of some of the key issues we've seen a lot highlighted through the last through the pandemic period around crewing. But can it be a force for good in sort of influencing the industry?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this one because I think we focus when we talk about whether the insurance industry should give discounted premiums to the good people and penalise the bad people, for example. I think we focus perhaps a little bit too much on price. And something that Tom just said resonated with me, which was about when the brokers and the underwriters look each other in the eyes and decide to let's do this long term. And I think that's perhaps the nub of it rather than price, because it's very difficult to be the first mover on price because they'll just go somewhere else. So if you try and penalise someone for not being as good at managing their crew as the next guy, well, they'll go somewhere else. So perhaps it is about that long-term relationship. I mean, we all know that figures are, but 70% or so of claims have some kind of human element, and so the Manila amendments to the STCW convention brought in human element leadership and management training, helm training. I thought that was very much, I said this yesterday, something that Joss was at, I thought this was very much lip service at first, but we are seeing the industry investing in leadership and management training for their crews because we know that impacts upon safety outcomes, morale and safety outcomes. And ultimately that's what leads to better loss prevention, and that's good for all of us. And so, yes, if you can, choose to enter into those long-term beneficial underwriting relationships with the people who are doing that, rather than necessarily giving them a $5 off their premium, then yes, I think the insurance industry can have a positive influence. But I was sort of sitting there wanting to disagree with the insurance members of the panel earlier on when Michael Parker was on the panel as well. And I agree that Michael was saying that the banks can choose who they lend to, and I'm always tempted to think yes, and the insurers can choose who they underwrite as well. But like I've said, it's not as easy as that. It's a tough market, and it's bloody difficult to make a profit in the market anyway. So, as I say, being the first mover is difficult. But so perhaps the long-term relationship angle is the way to go, Tom. But yes, I do think we can reward the people who are doing it better. And just quickly on crewing, one thing that we've seen from a recruitment perspective is ship owners and managers are really investing in their crewing departments at the moment. I've been around too long. It feels like 2 or 3 years ago, but it's probably 12 years ago, we didn't see crewing director salaries exceed about £65,000. And then about 8 or 9 years ago, it went above £100,000. And we've placed 2, possibly 3 crewing directors in the last 6 months on virtually £250,000 each salaries. And it just goes to show the calibre of people that are now being sought, and the fact that the ship owners are willing to pay for it to get their crewing functions run well. That they're getting it at last. It's a really important function.
Oh, that's fascinating. Just before we, yeah, wow. I can see a few sort of CVs sort of about. Just before we look at, we have one sort of final area of sort of interest, and it's I asked the next question to Staviana as with a straighter face as possible, regardless of who's asking that question. But Staviana, is the London marine insurance market too male, pale, and stale, or has there been a significant change, certainly in your career?
10 years ago, I would say yes. But there has been some significant movement to attract and retain talent and skills. I'm not talking only about gender. I'm just talking about attracting talent from a wider pool. So hard work and ambitions and excellence, it has no gender. It has no ethnicity. It can be from anywhere in the world. And having a diversified workforce, it only adds business value. You have more innovation in the team. You can understand your clients better. You can become more competitive. You can have local knowledge by getting people from all over the world. And Phil, I think that's more of your area. But what I would strongly recommend to UK-based companies, which are some of the biggest international companies, is why do they have to hire people that they either have to have UK academic background or UK-based experience? Because when I first came to the UK, the system would reject me because I had no UK. I didn't finish high school in the UK. So although I had master's degrees, the system would think that I didn't even finish high school.
Yeah, I mean, well, the answer is inherent bias and prejudice. There's no two ways about it. And it is slowly being chipped away at. But, you know, people hire in their own, historically have hired in their own image because it makes them feel comfortable. And we just have to break it down. And we, you know, it's now not acceptable to drive along without a seatbelt on. It's not acceptable to be seen driving along on a mobile phone. And these things just have to become unacceptable. And they are getting there. But it still exists, but to a lesser extent. It's like turning around a tanker. Yeah. It takes, you know, it can take a generation.
It does, but actually, sort of leading on from that point, is that you know, can we push hard on the diversity pedal, you know, but at the same time still retain and attract the best possible talent? We've seen lots of force change in organisations, and a change, you know, a change that needed to come and still needs to come as well. And if you look up the sort of the gender diversification on boards, you know, in particular. But what happens to, you know, to people that look and sound like, you know, like me and my sons and other people? What, you know, what does that do? You know, what does that still ensure that we're going to have the best possible people going to come, not just a wider audience?
You end up with a double problem, because sometimes the best possible people who might be male, pale and stale actually don't get a look in. So then you get this kind of reverse prejudice happening because people are trying to do the right thing. But I think sometimes what employers fail to do is to look outside the CV box, if you like. So, you know, they hire for a CV. Somebody's done X, Y, and Z before, and we must have X, Y, and Z on the CV. And I think that then limits the pool. So we'll often have particularly larger corporations coming to us and saying, you must get us a large selection of women for this panel, if diversity for them is women on that given day. And we'll go out and we'll scour the market and provide, you know, as many people from the diversity pool that they've requested as possible. But it's artificial because if there aren't that group of people there, then there aren't that group of people there. And what we sometimes have to say to employers is, stop looking for X, Y, and Z. The fact that someone's done it before doesn't mean they're any good at it. Why don't you train them? Why don't you look for people with transferable skills, who may be black, or who may be women, or whatever it is that you feel that you need to address, and invest. Take some responsibility for developing talent, rather than just nicking somebody else's that fits the bill. And that's the bit that we have to get people to address, I think.
I think the apprentice piece that Willis, I know, are pioneering that. I think that's fantastic. I also think, why do people need to have a university degree? In many ways, I did history at university. What does that actually bring to our business? In many ways, get someone in at 16 and train them.
I completely agree. Sorry, at risk of hogging the mic, but my two most successful friends were my two least successful friends at school, but they're 50 now, and they were in an era when you could enter without a degree, and I was dismayed when the Labour Party set this target of 50% of UK youngsters going to the university and coming up with degrees. It's just too many, and then you ended up with too many people with watered down degrees that added no value at all. And the consequence of that, ironically, and I think quite beneficially nowadays, is that we've seen employers starting to hire for personality again, and a much more interest in apprenticeships and school leavers, like you were saying. Somebody was saying earlier on, I think it was, I can't remember who it was. You had a school leaver.
We have.
You had a school leaver,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
And actually, the insurance industry is very good at that. Bringing people in at the age of 18. So, maybe things in that respect are reversing. But if you make everybody the same, then there's nothing to distinguish them. So you have to go back to grassroots and look at personalities and culture and so on.
But there's I guess, Melissa, there's an extension from that one as well, and something that you'd hinted on, and I sort of briefly mentioned earlier. But diversity looks diverse. I don't know where I'm going with this, this statement, but it comes in a number of ways. But I think one of the things that certainly from a hull machinery perspective, does the market look through its diversity to have people from a shipping background? Are there enough people who understand how to, what the sharp bit's called and what the blunt bit's called, and what left and right is, and I do know, by the way, or do we should we be looking more into that world?
I honestly do not know why we don't have more ex-mariners practicing in the London insurance market. With all due respect to my counterparties in the London insurance market as claims handlers, their knowledge is excellent. But when my counterparties in the Scandinavian market are mostly, or I would say 50%, are ex-officers, ex-mariners. And that I'm not one, but obviously getting to read a turbocharger damage report on a weekly basis, I wish I were. It would have definitely have helped to be able to visualize that turbocharger, the liner, the piston in a different way. I do not know why it's not in London. That system is not available. Perhaps it's wrong to say the system is not available. I do not know where the opportunity hasn't been there or the attraction hasn't been there. I know there are schemes, and Maritime London is a forerunner of that scheme whereby officers find attractive jobs onshore. And I think it would be a perfect match, because in the Scandinavian market, especially as claims practitioners, it works perfectly well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm conscious we have a few minutes left. Olga hasn't kicked me yet, so that's a good sign. And we have some questions. Always love an anonymous question as well, but I'm not going to start with that one because I haven't read it yet. But I'm going to have a look at there's a couple of questions from people who are online and before I open up to the floor. But the first one from Alex Is the panel concerned that P&I clubs might be building a hold capacity purely to generate greater competition in P&I rates and circumvent the IGA competition rules? Wow. Does Hull create a loophole? Discuss. Savriana, for someone that very much plays in both in both worlds of Hull and P&I. Do you think it's an easy win for the P&I clubs?
I don't think so, because they have seen, if I may say, horror stories in the past, so they don't want to dilute their success that they have had. There are not many P&I clubs left that they don't do anything on the Hull market. There are only just a few, and there have been rumors that they may be entering the Hull market because they may have bought a few peripheral underwriting agencies, but not yet made it to the Hull market. I don't think they're trying to circumvent the IGA rules because they will be two completely separate entities.
And they've done that through their fixed facilities anyway.
Exactly.
So they didn't need to do that.
I can't see that happening.
Yeah, and I'm inclined to agree. I think it's more about whether it's the diversification of the portfolio. I think that's an important thing. I think it's also creating a greater stickability as well with your clients. If you can offer your clients more, then they're more likely to want to be with you for longer. But I think perhaps in the past there may have been an interest in that one. Yes. Right. Looking at this next question from Rob Johnson. Marine underwriters are understandably concerned about systemic losses, hence the clause 380, the cyber clause, which has now been updated, and now the AIS clauses. Ship owners see neither of these as significant exposures. How can we join the dots? Who wants to take that one on? Yes. I see Tom's just suddenly moved further backwards.
I mean, cyber is absolutely fascinating. I'm sure everyone's been involved in these conversations over the last few years. Certainly 3 years ago, when it was all being mooted, you'd go to most ship owners and they'd say, come on, this is ridiculous. We have an IT department if they're of a certain size or they're not that concerned. But certainly in the last 6 months, I think things have started to change. I think any company that's publicly listed or has any sort of outside investment is being told they've got to shore up every single angle on this. I think we've made it quite clear as an industry that we are excluding cyber risk. And if you are excluding something, then I think you have to, but we have a responsibility as brokers, certainly, to make sure that our clients know that there might be a hole there. And the cyber market has developed lots. So like with all these new products, I think people immediately go, I don't understand it. I don't want to understand it. It won't ever happen. But slowly but surely, it does.
Or there's another danger in that people buy that, a elaster plaster to fix the broken arm, or to prevent the broken arm, probably from that perspective. There's always a danger. We've got, have we got a product? We've got a product. Therefore, we've done that. So, so the risk manager can go and talk to the board and say, cyber, which sits right at the top corner of your risk register, is we've got something that let's hope we don't have to test it, but it will do something. But
and there are a lot more options available now, aren't there, at much reduced costs. So I think the market is sort of sorting itself out on that.
Nice. There's one more question from Anonymous, but I like this one, so I'm going to ask it anyway. Remote and flexible working supports diversity and inclusion. Yet the panel seem to want people back in London offices, which seems to ignore this and forgets the other UK regions. How do you reconcile?
May I answer this? Because
yes, it was you. You answer that question.
I have a very conflicting view on that because as a mom, and I have 3 kids, I am delighted to be working from home. It gives me great flexibility. Before having the opportunity to work from home, I was torn, or I had to take holiday from work just to be able to attend the 2-hour event at my daughter's school. But at the same time, I do enjoy this. I haven't been this delighted in my recent professional career, because I feel the energy of everyone around me. I feel in a long time I wore a suit. I feel quite professional, and I also feel that I owe it to the City of London. I have a duty. It was a ghost town, it's picking up, and the City of London has given so much to me that I have to do what I have to do for it. But then, yes, working from home does provide flexibility, cost saving, depending on your situation. I pay less for caretaking, or you may pay less for transportation if you are more outside of London. So I believe that it's a very hot topic, and it's going to be a hot topic for the corporations to manage people's expectations and allow people to find the right balance.
Phil, I mean, you've spent a lot of time and recently doing a lot of recruiting for some senior roles. And
Yes, absolutely.
Has that dynamic change in terms of how the conversation works?
Well, we run, we're secretariat of an association called the Maritime HR Association. We have almost 100 members, ship owners, ship managers, commodity traders, and oil majors, that kind of thing. And they get together and chat and share things, salaries, but also opinions. And we've had a few webinars where we've all got together and discussed what everyone's plans are, and it's been interesting to look at attitudes, and so much of this is about trust. I was saying earlier on that what I think is good now is that we will have flexibility. Lots of old farty CEOs who were cynical about their staff, I think, have got over that in the last 18 months and have realised that actually they do employ grown-ups and that they can be trusted to work when they're at home. And so the point I was making earlier on about coming back to the office is that particularly around youngsters, trainees, that they need to learn by absorbing. I said osmosis, but by absorbing from their colleagues. You don't just get to wear the T-shirt. You have to sort of break a few limbs, if you like, or break a few eggs, whatever it is, to make an omelette, before you get the T-shirt. And sitting at home on your own in isolation, you just don't get to absorb that information. Now, I think what's going to happen is that there's going to be some give and take on both sides. And we're already seeing quite a lot of stories of employees just being a bit unreasonable with their employers, and saying things, well, this is not convenient for me. I've got used to taking little Johnny to school at 3 or picking Johnny up at 3 o'clock and stuff. You've got a job, so it's give and take on both sides. I think it's absolutely great that we now do seem to be able to get it into our heads that we can trust our staff. The flip side of that is that some staff have to remember they have a job and they have a duty to their colleagues, not just to the company, but to their colleagues to help them do their jobs. And sometimes that means coming in. Not every day, but sometimes. Yeah. So it's give and take. And I can see Joss is desperate to speak.
I think it's a really interesting question. And this panel was talking earlier about coming back, and actually the danger if it takes a long time to come back. I've spoken to Simon about this. I've spoken to Phil about this. I think that I was certainly expecting, come June the 19th, if you like, for everyone to start flooding back into the city. I thought everyone was going to be itching to get in front of people, to see people, to meet up, etc. We've run 3 events during LISW. We've probably had over 1,000 people online during those events. And I just wonder whether we're making assumptions about young people, about wanting to get back into town, etc., when actually they're quite happy working from home and engaging from home. They've become very, comfortable with the online world, I suppose. And I think my question to the panel is, how prescriptive can companies be in terms of getting them back into the market? Because as I think Tom said, if they don't get back into the market soon, there's going to be a skills gap that is created.
Yeah, and it is very difficult because I use an example of another one of our apprentices who's just coming into the office on a Monday now with his team and now has to find £50 for that return train ticket for that day. It's £50 that last week on a Tuesday it doesn't spend, and then last week it doesn't spend. Well, that's for a young person that's a challenge. So there's that financial side, regardless of the fact that prior to this that person was commuting every single day. And had he got used to absorbing that cost. I think we have a responsibility and a stewardship to because people don't know what they don't know, and that's that's an overhanging phrase, but it's true. And actually, I think one of the things, he's part of my leadership team on the ship owner side is like Stabriano came up through our graduate route, and he will always tell you the story of the first ever client meeting I took him to, and when he didn't he got his phone out in the middle of the meeting to have a quick check at on social media, and he's only ever done that once, and that was a learning process. But of course, strange enough, he's still. But that comes as part of, and that's because that's part of that behavioural thing, and that's so it is difficult for us to suddenly say, right, you're back in the office, this is how you're going to behave, this is what you're going to do. But it's and we've never been faced with a situation like this before, and that's
it's again sort of what you were saying, Simon, about what makes this market unique and what you learned when you were a trainee is how to behave and how to engage. And that's a very different skill online to what it is in person. And I think it will be really interesting over the next 6 months or so. And let's hope we don't get back into a situation where the government advises us to work from home again, et cetera, et cetera. And that might happen, and there's nothing we can do about that. And I agree that there will be a balance, but we've got to get young people back into the market.
We have. I read an article recently which talked about when we talk about young people, we can talk about millennials or Gen Z. I think it was William Hague wrote this article, and he said millennials love working from home. Yes, this is super. We can just. No one told me we could do this 10 years ago when I joined this industry. I was sweating. It's a nightmare. And now I'm at home and I've just started a family, and actually life's looking pretty good. I know lots of people in the industry because I've done 10 years in my career. But William Hague was saying, well, Gen Z have had none of that, and they want all of it. So if the millennials want to work from home, fine, but you might not have a job in 10 years because the Gen Zs are just going to be all over you. And I love that idea. I was like, what, brilliant, I'm back in the office. Let's go. But I think this is how things are going to change.
And that's a very good point. I was expressing how much I enjoyed working from home. And we were having a directors meeting discussing how we are going to go back to the office, so forth. And one of my colleagues pointed out exactly what you have said. Yes, Melis, you've been in the industry for almost 20 years. You learned, and you can continue your meetings when you want in person. You can work from home. Okay, you have the skills or experience to be in that position. About your new colleagues, and that was a very good question because I have a duty to my new colleagues, junior colleagues, who are to learn on the job. Because my directors then, when I was a junior colleague, did teach me on the job.
Yeah,
Can I say one final thing? Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that shipping is a people's business. People buy insurance from people. We are expected to be subject matter experts, and then it's about growing the relationship. So unless you are in the office working with your colleagues, having that vibe that motivates you and drives you, it's just not going to happen. So the youngsters need to feel that and be motivated by that. So I can't see them being where we are at the moment in 10 years if they don't spend some time in the office now.
Companies will just stagnate.
Yeah.
They'll start to be. They were quite good ones.
Yeah.
But
And
it's
not the formal training, is it? It's the stuff you overhear, and somebody overhears you and then comes and corrects you, and and so on.
I'm conscious that true to form I've overrun, but I know we got some questions from and Martin. Martin has the first one. Yeah.
Okay, so I could go a couple of ways with this, but maybe we'll go over that with coffee. But just to the earlier point you were making, I think it depends on the role you have. whether you can work successfully from office or not, right? If you're on business development and you're not at the meeting, you're on the menu. That's just the fact of it. So if your competitors are meeting face to face, you're going to do the same. But I think it has to be role specific, is my view. And I found that discussion on diversity fascinating because, I've just come out of an organization where actually the diversity we're trying to build was between innovative and agile and expert and domain knowledge expertise. And it's two clashes of cultures. They're completely different. So I found that very interesting, because how do you bring these kind of two things together? So I think diversity is absolutely important, but we need to think also about this diversity in terms of innovation versus domain knowledge. And that goes earlier to the point we were talking about in terms of expert-led or data-led. But I'll save that for discussion over coffee. I think it's thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from the floor? It's just to make you walk as far as possible, John.
Working me hard.
The answer to your question, Richard, is you can't skin a skeleton.
Richard Greiner from BDO. I just wanted to get the panel to reflect on Brexit again. We touched on it earlier. We had, whatever it was, 4.5 years to get ready, which I think actually in hindsight was a good thing, in terms of often when you get something new and challenging, if you've got time to plan, and we certainly had plenty of time to plan, you can deal with what you think's coming down the line. Now we're 8 months afterwards. Two aspects, I suppose. One is in the context of insurance in London. What have we learned post-Brexit in the past 8 months? What do we need to do from the business model perspective? But also, I think importantly, what have we learned, or what are we learning about recruiting talent for the future? Are there issues already emerging where we can see people that are already here are in a fortunate position if they came from the European Union, but in that wider space? I'd be just interested to hear the panel's view.
And how we continue to sort of one of the great things that within, if you move again, and it will be one day, our floor, the marine floor in our office, you will meet people from Greece, you'll meet people from India, you'll meet people from Korea, and Hong Kong, Chinese, Hong Kong Chinese people. I think, and then London has always been a great draw for international talent. But but our European talent and our Italians and our Greeks found it much easier to get in, or we found it much easier to recruit. And now we have to treat European. And going back to the whole point about sort of bringing that shipping, where's the shipping talent, the shipping expertise? How do we get that into London? It's suddenly become harder to to bring people in and promote that promote the diversity. And we had a long time to think about Brexit. I think most of them, even people like me, buried our heads in the sand and thought that great, it's either something's going to happen and it'll all go away, or but we spent. But then we spent all our efforts preparing for the hardest of Brexits, which ultimately is the position that we've from a financial services which we've ended up with, and we've added layers of cost, complexity, and even I send you an email. I've got two, I have two addresses under there. I work for Willis, our UK regulated business, and I work for Willis SANV, our Willis Towers Watson SANV, which is our Belgian Belgian. And all of a sudden, for the first time in many years, I've had to start doing exams, and my sort of Belgian exams aren't much fun. But I'm sure the Belgians will think the English exams aren't much fun either. But from that point of view, so that's my take on it. But any other thoughts?
I think it's all terribly sad, frankly. I can't quite work out how we ended up in this position, but then I can't quite work out how Donald Trump ever became president either. So nonsense happens, doesn't it? But we're just going to have to really see how the visa system pans out over the coming years, and whether both the UK and the various European governments take a pragmatic approach to it. What we've had in the past is points-based systems, and then we've had highly skilled migrant programs where we've you manage to squeeze in the difficult jobs, and you've got individual industries, and we may well find ourselves, Joss, as Maritime London, having to lobby government to make certain maritime jobs, a shortage occupation in the future. But at the moment, we just don't know. But I just think it's all so completely unnecessary and such a terrible shame, really.
I guess as we've overrun now so much, but we can take perhaps if there's one more question from the floor. If not, I'm happy to, Sundeep.
Thanks, Simon. The question was linked to the Norwegian market. There was a couple of comments which said that the Nordic markets are much ahead in offering value compared to the London market. So do you see room for London insurers to offer those value-added services and probably get paid for it? Because the Norwegians market do collect claims fees and all those ancillary charges. And I believe the London market has the capabilities, but nobody's willing to pay for it. It's always been, going around in circles that should we share that cost? Because it doesn't make sense for a follower to hire a mariner to handle claims because the scale is not enough. But for a lead underwriter to have that claims handling expertise and share the cost, do you think it's possible?
I assume that that cost basis is for claims handling, because with the Scandinavian market model, not only that Scandinavian underwriters do offer in-house adjusting, but even when there's no claim, in the sense that the PA claim is below deductible, but there have been survey fees, there is an added cost to it to the expense of the following underwriters, survey fees plus claims handling fees. I don't think London market can do it. Not because they don't have the capacity to, because they as well may hire average adjusters as part of their companies. But London market, when it comes to these initiatives, are very segmented. So apologies for telling the truth. If one underwriter or one syndicate aims to do that, I don't think the other underwriters in London who would be on a following basis would appreciate that. I do not see it happening. And at the same time, I did actually once give a seminar on this subject called "What is your flavor? Do you like chocolate ice cream or vanilla ice cream?" I think we cannot have the Scandinavian model, or we do not have to have the Scandinavian model replicated in London. Some ship owners do prefer the London model, where they have an independent adjuster looking after their claims, because it's an independent adjuster, but appointed by the ship owner. Their fees are paid by the underwriters. They prefer that system compared to the Scandinavian model, whereby the Scandinavian underwriter, the claims handler, is much more involved in the claims process. On the other hand, some ship owners do love that system, whereby they would like their leading underwriter to take care almost of all the bits and pieces of the claim process, obviously with the assistance of their broker. So I personally do not see it happening in London, and it doesn't necessarily need to happen in London. But London can do, from the claim side, can do more client-facing. I've been to Maritime Cyprus conferences since I've started my career, so I would say approximately 8 or so, doesn't matter. And in those, over the 18, 20 years, only once I've seen one London claims handler present at the Maritime Cyprus conference, in comparison to Scandinavian markets, whereby both the underwriter and the claims team are present.
I've always been amazed as well, Sunny, that everyone is so averse to paying for someone else to do it. You're paying for someone else to do it anyway. They'll just be an independent party. People are just so obsessed with not lining someone else's pocket. But in reality, if you're writing a proportional line across a placement, you're all in it together. So why don't you trust someone like AXA XL? I mean, you guys have got the resources to be able to do it. I don't see why there shouldn't be just, something better added. The only guys in London who I think genuinely do something along those lines are Beazley. They have their own in-house surveyor. And they lead a lot of our business for the specific reason that as soon as something goes wrong, they fly their surveyor on a plane straight out. They don't charge the following market for that. That is just their cost. They think that is so important to their offering. And I think that stands them apart. I would always want them as a leader as a result, just like I would always want a Scandinavian, because they just go a little bit further.
Thank you.
I started this session by saying I was very proud of being part of this market and had been for the 30 years, and I hope that will continue to do. I do want to finish on a positive note, and I still am very proud of and I see a real positive sort of view on it. But but we have a stewardship, a responsibility, as all of us, to ensure that that actually what sets us apart and makes us special continues, and we continue to invest in the right talent and actually support the development of this marketplace. So thank you all for your attention and your contributions.
Simon, thank you so much. Thank you to the panel. I thought that was a really fascinating way to end the session. I think I've certainly got a lot more questions which I could have asked, which I might save till later. There's certainly some things I might email you, Simon, in the future. You'll be pleased to hear that has arisen in my mind that we might be able to do in the future, I suppose. And I think one of those things is, does the marine market need to be more assertive within Lloyd's and actually within the shipping industry about what it actually needs and what it actually wants? There's a lot of stuff directed at marine insurers, and perhaps we need to be pushing back a bit harder to explain, actually, this is the realities of the market. I think the panel before, it was really altruistic, and I thought it was really interesting about people were talking about shared responsibility. But I think there is an inherent tension there, particularly when you look at the pressure that underwriters are being put under in the market. And we've got to understand that tension if we're going to bring about meaningful change in the future. I thought that was a fascinating conference. Thanks to everybody who turned up. Thank you to all of our speakers today. I think we topped out about 470 people joining, which is fantastic. I think it shows that there's still a huge interest in terms of what's going on in marine insurance in London. And again, I'd like to thank everyone and hope they have a good rest of London International Shipping Week. Thank you.
Thank you, John.